Welcome back to Spring It's Math 5. This is Mr. Stein here again, and today we're dividing fractions and mixed numbers. Okay, so this lesson's going to kind of go over a lot of the different things we've already learned. So we're going to move not at a real fast pace, but we're going to check on a lot of different things, so hang in there. Okay, so we know that division is the opposite of multiplication. In fact, we could say that multiplication is the inverse operation of division. So what is the inverse operation, you're probably asking yourself. Actually, I know you're not, because we've talked about that a ton. So an inverse operation, as you know, is the opposite operation, just a fancy way of saying it. So if the opposite of addition is subtraction, then subtraction is the inverse operation of addition. We can also say the same thing for division and multiplication. Division is the inverse of multiplication, and multiplication is the inverse of division. So what do inverse operations have to do with dividing fractions? When we divide fractions, we need to perform the inverse operation. We divide a fraction, we have to to divide a fraction, we have to multiply by the reciprocal of the second fraction. So what's the reciprocal? I know you know this one too. A reciprocal is the inverse or opposite form of a fraction. So when we change the division to its inverse, multiplication, we also change the second fraction to its reciprocal. So we can make any fraction a reciprocal by simply flipping the numerator and the denominator. So remember some of our tricks. Keep, change, flip, and multiply. Okay, so think about it like that. So keep those in mind. All right, so the product of any fraction and its reciprocal is always 1. So it's kind of a weird concept, so think about it. So if I did 1/2 is going to be equal to 2 over 1, right? The reciprocal. So 1/2 times 2 over 1 is 2 over 2. Well, 2 over 2 is 1. So no matter what fraction I look at, if I multiply it by its reciprocal, I'm going to get 1. So if I have 1/6 times 6 over 1, I'm going to get 6 over 6, which is the same as having 1. Because remember, if the numerator and the denominator are the same number, you have 1. Okay, so now let's divide a fraction by a whole number. You've learned a couple things about dividing fractions. One, to divide fractions, we are actually going to use the inverse operation of multiplication. Two, the second fraction is going to become its reciprocal or opposite. We're going to flip it. So how do we divide a fraction by a whole number? To divide a fraction by a whole number, we have to think about what we're actually being asked to do. We're being asked to take a part of something and split it up. So let's look at an example so that we can, make sense of this. So we have 1/2 divided by 3. So this problem is asking us to take 1/2 and divide it into 3 parts. So here's a picture of what this would look like. So you see here I have a half of something. So this is 1/2. We're going to divide 1/2 into 3 parts. So how much would we have in each part? So you can see here I've divided it into, each one into 3 different parts. So we've divided 1/2 into 3 sections. Each part is 1/6 of a whole. Okay, another way, if you're looking at this one, if you just do horizontal lines, it also would come out the same. It might be a little easier to draw. Okay, so how can we do this without drawing pictures? Now, I know a lot of times I start out with pictures and we kind of move to the math part. As you know with me, I think a lot of times going through the math is a little more straightforward, makes a little bit more sense. And quite frankly, it's a little easier. You're not relying on visually representing things all the time. So that is where we multiply by the reciprocal, and that's where that really comes in handy. So we have 1/2 divided by 3. So we have 1/2 divided by 3. We're going to put 3 over 1 like we talked about in a previous lesson. Anytime you have that whole number and you want to make it into a fraction, you just put it over 1. So now I have 1/2 divided by 3 over 1. We're going to keep, change, and then flip. So we have 1/2 times 1/3 is going to equal 1/6, because 1 times 1 is 1, and 2 times 3 is 6. And luckily 1/6, it's already in simplest form, so we know we have 1/6. And that's kind of going back to what we just talked about when we had that half and we divided it by 3. Okay, now let's divide a whole number by a fraction. We can also divide a whole number by a fraction. When we divide a whole number by a fraction, we're taking a whole and dividing it into new wholes. So let's look at an example to understand this. So we have 1, and we're going to divide it by half. So now at first glance, you would think that this answer would be 1/2, but it isn't. Let's look at the picture. So we have our whole here. Now we're going to divide one whole by 1/2. So now you're going to have 2 1/2 sections, so our answer is 2. I know, a little confusing. So we can test this out by using the rule that we've learned in the last section. So to divide fractions, 1, we change to multiplication. 2, we change the second fraction to its reciprocal. Keep, change, flip. All right, so we have 1, and we're going to divide it by a half. So remember, we have to keep the 1 over 1 because we have to make it a fraction. And then we're going to use the inverse operation of division. We're going to multiply it, so we change it to a multiplication sign. And then we have the reciprocal of 1/2, which is 2 over 1. We multiply across. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 1 is 1. We have 2 over 1. We're going to divide that out because technically it's an improper fraction. 2 divided by 1 is 2, so our answer is 2. I know, a little tricky there. Okay, so now let's divide a fraction by a fraction. We've been dividing whole numbers by fractions and fractions by whole numbers. We can also use what we've learned when dividing a fraction by another fraction. So here's the rule. As we've seen before, change to multiplication, change the second fraction to the reciprocal. Keep, change, flip. So now let's apply it. So we have 1/2 divided by 1/3. And I know right now you guys are thinking, wait, we've done this before. And we have. So let's just really, cement this into our minds so that we have it forever. So we have 1/2 divided by 1/3. We have 1/2 times 3 over 1 because we kept the half, we changed the division sign to a multiplication, and then we flipped it. So 1/3 became 3 over 1. So now we have 1 times 3 is 3, 2 times 1 is 2. So we have 3 over 2, 3/2. Now, we can't leave it as an improper fraction. We have to change it to a mixed number. So we have 3 divided by 2 is 1 with the remainder of 1. And I know right now you're thinking, wait, my whole number is going to be 1. My remainder is going right on top of that fraction, and you're correct. So I have 1 and 1/2. Okay, let's try another one. We have 8/9 divided by 1/3. So we have 8/9, and then we're going to times it by 3 over 1 because we're going to keep the 8/9, change the sign, flip the other one. So we have 8/9 times 3 over 1. 8 times 3 is 24. 9 times 1 is 9. So now we have 24 divided by 9 because we can't leave it as an improper fraction. We have to convert it to a mixed number. So we have 24 divided by 9. Well, that's going to go in 2 times with a remainder of 6. So I have my whole number is 2. My remainder goes on top of my denominator. So I have 2 and 6/9. Now, I'm looking at that fraction and thinking, wait, 6 and 9, they share something. 6 can't go into 9, but 3 can go into both. So I'm going to pull a 3 out of both of them, just like we talked about long ago when we were reducing fractions for the first time. So we think 6 divided by 3 is 2. Whatever we do the top, we do the bottom. 9 divided by 3 is 3, 2/3. So you keep your same whole number of 2, and then you put it right next to your 2/3 that we just pulled out. Okay, that's going to kind of wrap up that dividing fractions. See you next time.